Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. If you've heard of top-down mixing, or sometimes I call it backwards mixing, it's a really cool approach. But there are times when it doesn't work, and in fact, it can hurt you. Let me show you how. So the concept of top-down mixing is you, instead of putting a lot of processing on individual tracks, you bus similar tracks to a subgroup, to a bus, to its own fader. Then you can put processing on that channel that will apply to everything. So drums is a great example. I put a compressor on my drum bus. All the drums are running through it, and it adds this tightness and this kind of magic to the overall drum sound. And it can be really cool. So I do a lot of this backwards top-down mixing where I will process all the guitars through a set of plugins first, and then I can go adjust the individual guitars that maybe need a little extra EQ or extra compression or things like that. Where it can get tricky is with compression. So here's a mix that I'm working on that's pretty close to the finish line, and it's a big, heavy rock mix, and it's got a bunch of guitars. Not a bunch, it's got a handful of guitars that sound pretty cool. So let me just play the guitars with some EQ, and that's maybe a little bit of reverb, but that's about it. There's two main rhythm guitars. And then I wanted to thicken it up with like a fuzzy guitar to have that up the middle to kind of fill things out. So anyway, here's where the top-down mixing thing can hurt you. Let's say we've mainly got these main rhythm guitars up into our bus. And let's say we want to add a bunch of compression just to see what happens. So we pull up something like this 1176 sort of sound, and let's just see what that sounds like with the guitars. I'd say that's too much compression, but let's say we fell in love with that sound, or we just didn't realize it. We set up the compressor and then we turned some things up, and that compressor, I mean, you can see it on the meter. It's going down like 7 to 10 dB of gain reduction, which is quite a bit on something like electric guitars that are already fairly compressed just by the nature of the tone itself. So the problem here is, let's say we're working on our mix and we say, man, I want a little more of this fuzz guitar in the mix. Listen to what happens, and look at what happens to the gain reduction as I turn up this guitar going into that compressor. There's this weird, almost auto-balancing thing happening. So as I turn up the fuzz guitar, eventually it gets so, to be able to hear it, I have to push it up really high. It gets so high that the compressor hears that as the loudest thing, and it turns everything down, which makes it sound to our ears like when we turn up the fuzz guitar, the other guitars get turned down. Listen to it again. Compared to if there was no compression at all, it would sound like this. We would just hear more of the fuzz guitar, but the other guitars wouldn't go down. Can you hear the difference? Now, we were bringing in more of that guitar, but not also getting less of the rhythm guitars. And that's where top-down mixing can hurt you. If you go aggressive with the compression on your bus, that can be okay. Just keep in mind, any level adjustments you make before that bus might be ignored, or they might actually hurt the mix. This happened to me. I was sitting here and I had probably a little too much compression on the mix bus. And listen, I'm sitting here saying these guitars need to be bigger. So I say, well, that fuzz guitar is big. Let's turn that up. And the net result is the guitars actually sound quieter in the mix. Take a listen. So it did a number of things. First, it turned down the rhythm guitars. They almost disappear once we can finally hear the fuzz guitar. It also turned down the lead guitar. So now all we're hearing is the reverb on it that was on ascend, and we're not hearing the actual lead itself. So be careful when you're compressing on a bus, and there's lots of things feeding it. If you're going to go make a lot of volume adjustments later in the mix, which is fine, make sure you're not over-compressing. And if you are over-compressing, know that it's going to make your level adjustments almost moot, or it might even do the opposite thing, where you turn one thing up and the other gets turned down. It's both the beauty and the frustration of working with compression, especially on a more global level. So my suggestion is, instead of this setting, we're going to turn this plugin off. Here's what I would prefer to do. I like the little bit of tightness and compression that the compression gives, but I don't want that much. This is more the amount of compression that I think is appropriate for these guitars. See, right there, I just pushed up that fuzz several dB, and I could hear the fuzz, and it didn't just completely duck the other guitars. They're all kind of glued together, but there's just a little bit of compression that leaves us a lot more room to work. The other option is just don't compress. You might not need to. I may end up turning this compressor off altogether for the reasons I stated in this video, but if you're gonna do compression and you're running into that problem, just do a little bit of compression, can go a long way. All right, that's it for me. If you've been subscribed for a while and you haven't checked out my 5-step mix guide, you need to. Go to 5stepmix.com. It's absolutely free, and it'll help you get better mixes and faster mixes and happier mixes, more joyful mixes. Okay, that's it. See ya.